Hello again, I'm Braddock Supervisor John Cook. Welcome back to Braddock Neighborhood News, the program I am using to provide you with information on issues facing our community and ideas on how we can strengthen our neighborhoods. Each year, each member of the Fairfax County Board of Supervisors selects as Lord and Lady Fairfax 2 people from each district who have demonstrated outstanding volunteer service, heroism, or other special accomplishments to receive the award. This month, I'm pleased to have with us this year's Braddock District honorees, Tessie Wilson and Doug Brammer. Both Tessie and Doug exemplify the qualities of community service and volunteerism that we look for, and I appreciate their taking time out of their busy days to sit down and talk. Tessie, Doug, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having us.
Good to be here.
You know, both of you have given so much back to the community. Let's just start off a little bit about some of what you've done, Tessie. A lot of years on the school board. You've survived all of that. Now in school board retirement, but not community retirement. Tell us a little bit about the school board and your service there.
It was really a very rewarding 12 years for me. I feel passionately about kids. I feel passionately about education. I started by advocating for my own kids, and I just took it to the next level. So as much as I enjoyed my 12 years, I certainly am enjoying my retirement and staying busy.
That's very good. And Doug, you know, you and I see each other an awful lot because you seem to be at everything, and it begins with your position at Verizon. What do you do with Verizon?
Really two main responsibilities. I'm responsible for government affairs with a particular concentration on state government affairs, and then I'm also responsible for corporate philanthropy.
And that's where your community involvement has started. And I know one place that I see every year is the Valor Awards. And let's talk a little bit about that project from the Fairfax County Chamber of Commerce.
Valor Awards, very, very important to the community, very important to me. And it really entails 2 things. It's recognition and publicly thanking our first responders, particularly those who have distinguished themselves in a line of duty. But it's also a scholarship fund, and many people don't realize this, that the work of the Valor Foundation includes providing scholarships to the children of the Valor Award winners. And so that's a very important component of the overall Valor Foundation and the Valor program.
And every year for that program, hundreds of people from our Fairfax County businesses come out to contribute, to be there to honor our first responders, and it's a great event as well as a great just way to honor people who have really gone the extra mile in serving the community.
It really is. It's very well attended, as you pointed out, and I think inevitably when people sit and listen to the stories, the impact that our first responders have had, I think to a person they find it to be very inspirational.
And then Doug, you jumped the spectrum and you've been chairman of the Arts Council. Very different from dealing with our first responders, but talk about the Arts Council a little bit.
Well, the Arts Council is very appreciative because the Fairfax County Board of Supervisors has been supportive of the Arts Council, providing us with resources so that we can then in turn provide grants to some of the artists and art communities in the county. And so we're very appreciative of our working relationship with the supervisors. And then we take those skills and the resources from the artists and we try to employ them in different ways to serve the county. And so in some cases it might be through community kinds of activities. In many other cases it's actually working with the school systems and giving the children and the students exposure to arts in ways that they might not otherwise have an opportunity to be exposed. So we feel as though it's very, very worthwhile programs that the Arts Council helps to coordinate.
And Doug, you mentioned the schools, and so much of what we do with our schools does have a lot of community involvement at the beginning of it. And Tessie, even before being on the school board, you were involved in the PTA and such. And talk a little bit about how our community members can really contribute to our schools.
Well, I think probably the most important thing is for them to start getting involved in the activities that their kids do. And that, I think, leads to involvement in the schools. My involvement actually started when my kids were playing sports with BRYC and with Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts. And I think if you want to really be involved, then you take it to that next level and you get involved in what's going on in their education. Because to me, that's probably the most important involvement an individual parent can have, and that's to be involved in their child's education. And for many people who start out becoming involved in their own child's education, they take it to the next step and become involved in other things that support education or support kids in general. Doug and I actually met each other because of both of our involvement with kids and education. So there's a huge group of people out there who really are very supportive of kids and education and all that goes with it. So I think the transitions are pretty easy once you get involved.
And you know, that is interesting that maybe we've come a long way from having schools be a place where, you know, the thought was, oh, you drop your kids, they get educated, you pick them up at the end of the day. And it really is the whole community focused, the business community, more and more becoming very involved in our Fairfax schools, our community members. And Doug, Tessie, talk a little bit about how that community involvement enriches the educational opportunities that we have.
Well, I think it enriches it partly because when you involve the business community, by way of an example, obviously the business community has access to funding, which is very important to support different programs that the schools either are already doing or programs that the schools do need. But I also think you've got in the business community a number of very talented, capable people, and when they choose to invest themselves, when they choose to invest their time on different programs that are in the school systems, I think what you see is not only a sharing of the skills and resources, but you also then see, I think, a greater enlightenment of the volunteer themselves. And so it kind of feeds itself, has been my experience. So what do you think, Tessie?
I absolutely agree. Some of the best partnerships that Fairfax County Public Schools has with the business community does not entail money. There are many corporations around the county who say, one Friday a month, we're going to give you 4 hours, go volunteer at a school, go mentor a child. People tend to forget that in Fairfax County, about 1 in 4 children live in poverty. Those are the kids who are so benefited by the support from the business community in non-financial items, in the mentoring of a child, in the setting up of programs to help some of those kids, in tutoring. Doug's absolutely right. I mean, it's, you know, I hate to use the trite phrase that it takes a village, but really that's what it is. It has to be a partnership between all parts of the community to get involved. And it's not just education. I mean, it translates into involvement in your civic association, in other things that are going on in your community. So I think when people make the effort, they can always find something that feeds their passion. To volunteer on. There are just so many different opportunities.
And Doug, you said something which is one of my favorite themes, and that is that when people volunteer, they may go into that experience saying, well, you know, I'm doing this to help somebody or to help the community, and they find out that not only have they done that, but they themselves have gained even more in their own personal growth from that volunteer experience.
I think that is often the case, and I think part of what makes that work is relationship. The volunteer begins to develop relationships, whether it's with children that they're serving or whatever the client base might be, and they begin to develop a closeness, and they start to see progress, perhaps if they're helping a student. And it kind of transcends maybe what their initial goal might have been or what their initial thought about the volunteering might have been for them, and it begins to transcend that, and they develop relationships in many cases that continue on throughout a school year, and in some cases in subsequent school years. So you really begin to develop a continuum. I think that proves to be very effective, and in some cases I think it fuels their desire to volunteer in other capacities because they've had a positive experience, and they want to do, as Tessie was saying, they want to do more in the community.
And that, you know, I do think that people have within them, that we all have within ourselves, that desire to have an impact on the community around us. And sometimes we don't always see that or realize that until you have an experience where you do get involved in something, and there's a whole part of you that either you didn't know was there or you thought it was just a small part, and you realize there's a lot of people who come home from work and the best part of their day starts when they go out and coach a team, or they go and they do a school event, or they go to the civic association meeting, and they're involved in a nonprofit, and they gain a lot of the joy and fulfillment of their life through that experience.
I have to tell you, one of the things that I will take away from being a school board member is when you and I collaborated collaborated after the snowstorm in getting volunteers out to help clear sidewalks and roads and streets so kids could go on back to school. That to me was just a phenomenal thing. I mean, you know, we put the word out late, but hundreds of volunteers showed up because it was the right thing to do, and because I talked to so many people afterwards who said, what a great thing that was. I couldn't go to work anyway. It was something I could do. I could go out. I could help the community. So sometimes just those small ideas that you know, take life and move forward are exciting. I mean, I walked away from that feeling so good about the community and about everybody's willingness to pitch in and help when there was a real need.
You know what's interesting about that, though? I would just say what's interesting is the example that both of you set, because I think the leaders in our community have an opportunity to set a powerful example. And when you step out in what I thought was a very creative way, right, because we hadn't been hit with that kind of snow in years and years and years. And so coming up with that simple suggestion, hey, everybody grab a shovel, everybody kind of pitch it. You saw these neighborhoods almost en masse coming out in serving and helping one another out, actually getting to maybe talk more than we have in quite some time. But I attribute a lot of the success of that particular to the leaders who stepped out, made the suggestions, and set the examples for all of us. And so I would just not only publicly thank each of you, but just, I guess, reinforce the importance of the examples that you set for all of us, because I think it matters.
And you do see a lot of those side benefits when you get people in the community together to do one thing. You're right, they'll start talking, and pretty soon they're going off and launching some new effort and doing something that maybe, you know, you never thought of, and it builds on itself, because once you sort of light that fire within someone of having an impact on the community, they'll take it in whatever direction, you know, is theirs to go in, and you see incredible things, and you just got to let it go. You know, it's not something you centralize. You know, you can't sort of plan individual creativity, but you have to inspire it a little bit, and we've got a lot of that in Fairfax County.
I think it lends itself to what happens is people start talking more. There's more dialogue, and when there's more dialogue, you start talking about, you know what, the fencing over by the pool, you know, and you start talking about just little things like that, and it begins to build upon its own momentum. And I think it can be very, very helpful. And all of a sudden, you know, the old expression, it takes many hands make light work. And I think that's true. All of a sudden, you've got a community coming together to care for whatever particular needs there might be, and things can get accomplished very, very quickly because momentum is established, because some examples were set, and a lot of good can get done very, very quickly.
And we really have in Fairfax County an unusual amount of volunteerism. I was struck by, I think it was about a year and a half ago, I was an observer for a volunteer Fairfax emergency management training session, and it was a Saturday in which they were training volunteers who would run emergency volunteer collection points, essentially, if there was some disaster. It might be a weather disaster, it could be an attack, it could be any health hazard, something like that. And our director of emergency management said to me that other counties even in this area couldn't have that program because they don't have the volunteer capacity. They don't have the people willing to come out. And here we were on a Saturday morning, literally hundreds of people in the government center volunteering their time, learning how to run a volunteer gathering point in case there's some natural disaster or human-made disaster. It's just incredible.
I don't think you can force people to volunteer, but what you can do is give them opportunities to volunteer, opportunities that might mesh with where they have interests or where they feel they can really make a difference. And I think both the school system and the Fairfax County government have made those opportunities available. And I think it's a wonderful thing. I hope we continue to do that.
Tessie, and I'll turn our attention a little bit, because one of the organizations you've been involved in, College Access Fairfax, which was something you started. Why don't you
Correct.
tell us a little bit about that?
All right, I'll try to make it short. For those of you who have students who are about to go off to college, there is a government form called the FAFSA, Free Application for Federal Student Aid, which is the gateway form for all financial aid, whether it be merit aid, need-based aid, institutional aid. That form has to be completed. The form is longer than the 1040, which is the income tax form. And for many students and parents, it's just daunting and they can't complete it. And if they don't complete it, they don't get any financial aid. So our organization has free clinics for parents to come in, usually between January and the end of February, to complete the forms. Parents work one-on-one with a trained counselor, usually in a computer lab at the school. And we help parents complete that. We figured out that this year, based on the number of students and families we helped, that we probably found students to be eligible for over $250,000 in Pell Grants, which are federal grants going to low-income students. So it's something I feel very passionately about and will continue to do probably until my dying breath.
And only because you're an accountant can you manage not only to get through the form yourself, but to teach others how to use it.
To be perfectly honest, the first time I did the form as an accountant, I had trouble. So you can imagine our target population is primarily language minority parents and parents from lower socioeconomic groups. So if you can imagine that I, as an accountant, had trouble going through the form, you can imagine how daunting it is for others. But it's very worthwhile work.
And it's a great example of you start with a skill that you have from your own profession or such, and then just that concept of neighbors helping neighbors, and then you're able to start something that really takes off. And we've talked a lot about education here today, I think, because both of you have been so involved in education in so many different aspects, and one of those is the education foundation that the public schools and the Chamber of Commerce have established together. And Doug, why don't you tell us a little bit about that organization?
That was a coming together really of the leadership from Fairfax County Public School System and the Fairfax County Chamber of Commerce and businesses, where again there were some needs identified that needed to be fulfilled, and so this coming together by creating the foundation was a way to capture some of the talent and the resources of the business community in a way that we could prioritize those resources to help meet some of the more critical needs of the school system. And so Tessie and I have had the good fortune of working together on that foundation and on that board, and it's been a very dynamic experience. And
those needs, Tessie, really are evolving.
Both absolutely.
Demographic changes, financial changes.
Right, and as more and more is expected of teachers in a school system. Like you said, it used to be you walked a kid to school, you dropped him off and you came back. But schools are becoming more of an integral part of people's lives. And as schools are expected to do more, with often, at least recently, dwindling economic resources, the support of the business community has been just terrific in helping us meet some of the needs that we might not otherwise have been able to meet.
And tell us a little bit about how that, has helped the school system manage its budget challenges and some of those specifics of some of the ways that business funding and such has been used.
A couple of examples that come to mind is a couple of schools, for a variety of reasons, one of which, there is this new focus on the fact that kids don't get enough exercise and then they're not making healthy meal choices. Several schools have used money from the foundation to start gardens in their schools, which the kids then tend to. They harvest the food. Many of the cafeterias are serving the food. There's a kind of above and beyond what's expected of a normal K-12 environment, but something that's very worthwhile and that teaches kids a whole different level of skills and understanding than just 2 + 2 is 4. There are projects for summer enrichment for kids who need it. So the foundation is really in its infancy. We have probably many more projects than we have funding at the moment. But again, it's a collaborative effort between the school system and the business community, and we're all looking for really great things to come out of the foundation.
Doug, one of the things I've noticed about a lot of what the business community talks about, and a lot of it involved in education, is efforts to create an environment where our kids, as they grow up, they come out of the schools and they stay here in Fairfax County. our generation, most of us moved here from someplace else. That's how Fairfax County got built. But now, I'm seeing that there really is I think a recognition by the business community that we want to keep our homegrown kids here, and so we'll have sort of second generation Fairfax County, and that seems to be behind a lot of what the business community is doing, is saying we're going to educate our kids in a special way, because they're going to be our Fairfax County future.
I think there's a lot of truth in that, and I think we see that not only from an education perspective, but I think we see that now more in internship programs, workforce development programs, where we're trying to your point, we're trying to retain that talent and that mind share, if you will, here in our own community, to kind of reinvest so that we'll have the kind of skills and the resources and the personnel that we'll need going forward.
And I've sensed we're also getting a broader view of our educational goals, that we're not just focused on preparing kids for college. Of course, most kids in Fairfax County Public Schools will go on to college, but some will not. Some will go to a two-year school, some will go into vocations, and there is increasingly an emphasis on job readiness and vocational skills. And Tessie, talk to us a little bit from the school board perspective on kind of how that's evolving and the importance of really educating the full spectrum of our kids.
Right. Well, as a school system, we've always said we want kids to work up to their own full potential, and that doesn't necessarily mean going to college. As you know, Fairfax County has several academies that teach children all kinds of different skills, not necessarily for college-bound careers. There's cosmetology, there's culinary arts, there's auto mechanics. So I think it's a way to fit a child's ability with what we need here in Fairfax County. I was at an event the other day where Dr. Templin from NOVA said that in the next decade or two that they anticipate that there'll be a shortage of almost 500,000 workers here in Fairfax County. And he said they're not all going to require college degrees, that you still need an electrician and you still need a plumber and you still need all those other things. So hopefully we can give the kids options on what it is that they can do moving forward.
And Doug, that the business community has really been a leader on this, because it's been our businesses who are saying, hey, sure, we have our highly educated, engineer or technology experts and that kind of thing, but we also have our clerical staff, and we want them to be able to live in Fairfax County, and we want their kids to be educated, and we need the mechanic for the car, and we need the full spectrum in the economy, and we want the county to be able to sustain that whole population. And so we don't want this idea that, well, if you're not the high-paid engineer, you're living out someplace else, commuting in. We need to focus more on the county as a full community.
I think that's very true, and I think one of the benefits of bringing professional educators together and the business community together is that it helps sensitize us to what the needs are and what the trends are. I very much agree with Tessie's comment about the academies. So you've got these students. Not every student necessarily is going to have an interest in or perhaps even aptitude for college in a traditional sense, but they've got these wonderful skill sets and these wonderful interests and aptitudes in other areas that Tessie referenced, and we can provide for them, I think, a foundation on which they can make a good living right here in Fairfax County, and we can retain the value of them as a community citizen, as well as the skills that they would offer by staying right here in Fairfax County.
Another way that we help our kids is something that both of you have been very involved in, and that's scouting. And we have great scouting programs here in Fairfax County. Tessie, talk a little bit about your experience with scouting.
It seems to go on forever. Even though
it never does end, right?
It doesn't. Even though my son is 31, my husband is still very actively involved in Scouts. I mean, again, you come at it from your own kids. My daughter was in Girl Scouts, my son was in Boy Scouts. It was a way to interact with your kids, to stay involved with your kids, and then you just take it that next step, that even though your kids leave the program, it's worthwhile, it's a lot of fun. My husband is probably more of the scouter than I am, but he took kids to Bolivia and Guatemala and Iceland. It's a wonderful experience for kids, both girls and boys. It's something that builds character, that teaches them life skills, and I think it's just a great program, and why not be involved?
Right, and Doug, you've had a lot of scouting involvement yourself. What have been your experiences?
I do somewhat echo what Tessie would say. You know, what's interesting is I was not a scout growing up. So when we had children and my son came along and entered first grade, that's kind of where the entry level is for the Cub Scout program. And so that was my first exposure, and then I've just stayed with it over the years. And Tessie's exactly right. You're really teaching everything from the importance of physical fitness, good corporate citizenship. We use kind of big phrases like that as adults, but that's actually what we start teaching the children at a very young age. It's very values-based. And I think an important component of that is helping them and teaching them to give and serve others. And so that becomes a very important part of it. And there's a tremendous amount of fun aspects to it. When the children are younger, you do the Pinewood Derby kind of a car thing, and there's always a lot of energy.
I remember that.
A lot of energy
Never
and
won,
excitement.
but I remember the Pinewood
right?
Derby.
I mean,
that's
that's a telling example. But you remember those times, and I think it's also a great way to bring families together, whether it's mother, daughter, father, son, or just the family as a nuclear family, bringing them together through different projects, campouts. There are just a zillion activities. So I think it's a very healthy program that produces a lot of good and a lot of value.
And it doesn't, kids don't even realize it, but that program does teach them to be connected and involved in their community.
I think it does.
And there's so much more that we could talk about, but we're out of time. I want to thank Tessie and Doug for joining me today and congratulate them on being named Braddock District's Lord and Lady Fairfax for 2012. I very much appreciate all that they have given back to the community. They are superb examples of the engaged citizens we seek to cultivate here in Fairfax County. I hope you've enjoyed this segment of Braddock Neighborhood News. Thank you for watching. Tune in next month for another edition, and please remember to look for ways to volunteer. Your community needs you.